The paper in my hand weighs less than a single sheet of standard printer paper. It is thin, crisp, and entirely unremarkable to the untrained eye. But as it rests against my palms, it carries a weight that dwarfs the 10-ton laundry trucks I have driven for the past 6 years. It carries the weight of my survival. The document is stamped with the official, embossed seal of the Department of Transportation. The ink is still fresh, gleaming slightly under the harsh, unforgiving hum of the fluorescent lights in the administrative hearing room. The words are printed in a stark, black, bureaucratic font, but they read like a declaration of War I, expungement order. All records of the at-fault accident reported on March 15th, involving driver Cleo Ward, are hereby sealed, corrected, and permanently destroyed as if they never existed. I stand at the edge of the polished mahogany table. The wood is so highly polished I can see the reflection of my own worn-out work boots. Across from me sits the legal team for Vance Automation Technologies. They are packing their briefcases in a silence so thick it feels suffocating. The lead attorney, a man named Sterling who wears a suit that costs more than my entire annual salary, refuses to look at me. His fingers, manicured and soft, fumble slightly with the brass clasps of his leather bag. He knows what this piece of paper means. It means his client, a billionaire who trades in human obsolescence, has just been checkmated by a laundry driver with a shoebox full of receipts. My name is Cleo Ward. I am a commercial laundry route driver. I am a black single mother. And 6 months ago, a billion-dollar technology conglomerate tried to erase me from the road. They did not use guns. They did not use physical violence. They used something far more insidious. They used a fabricated accident report. They used a digital ghost to steal my commercial driver's license. They used the cold, unfeeling machinery of corporate policy to tell me that I was a liability, a danger, a woman who would never be allowed to hold a steering wheel again. They tried to strip me of my livelihood, my independence, and my inheritance. They failed. They failed because they fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the road. They thought the road was just a series of coordinates, a digital map that could be rewritten by a line of code. They thought truth was something that lived on a server, subject to deletion, manipulation, and algorithmic bias. But they forgot about the physical world. They forgot about the ink. They forgot about the paper. Paper does not lie. People lie. Algorithms lie. Billionaires lie. But paper remembers. Paper holds the weight of the truth long after the digital ghosts have been exorcised. How did a single mother force a tech empire to erase a lie from her permanent record? The answer is not found in a dramatic courtroom speech. There were no tears shed in this hearing room. There was no impassioned plea for mercy. The answer is found in a stack of handwritten way station tickets, a grease-stained logbook, and a delivery manifest my late husband left behind in the glove compartment of his truck. This is the story of how I fought back, not with shouts, not with vengeance, but with the quiet, relentless accumulation of the truth. Before I tell you how the trap snapped shut on Marcus Vance, I need to tell you what was actually at stake. I need to tell you about the road. Because to understand why I would rather burn the world down than surrender my license, you have to understand what the road gave me and what it took away. I learned to drive before I learned how to properly conjugate a verb. My father taught me to shift gears when I was just 12 years old. We were sitting in the cab of his rusted delivery truck, the vinyl seats cracked and taped over, smelling permanently of stale tobacco, diesel fuel, and black coffee. He was a large man with hands that looked like they were carved from oak. He placed my small hands over his on the massive steering wheel. "Cleo," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble that vibrated through the chassis of the truck. A truck is not a machine. It is an extension of your own body. You do not just steer it. You feel the road through the wheel. You hear the engine breathing in your bones. You respect the weight of it, and it will bring you home. He died when I was 19. There was no cinematic final speech. There was no dramatic music swelling in the background. It was a Tuesday afternoon. He was waiting at a red light on the corner of MLK Boulevard. He had a massive heart attack. His foot slipped off the brake. The truck rolled forward, slowly, heavily, and crushed a wooden mailbox into splinters. By the time the paramedics arrived, he was already gone. The only sound left was the idle rumble of the diesel engine and the ticking of the turn signal. I inherited his truck, and I inherited his debts. I was 19 years old, pregnant with my daughter Maya, and holding the keys to a vehicle that smelled like my father's ghost. I sold the truck to a scrapyard for pennies on the dollar, just to pay off the medical bills and the back taxes. I kept only one thing from that cab, a stack of handwritten delivery manifests he had tucked into the sun-bleached glove compartment. Every route he had ever driven, every stop, every signature, 412 days of his life recorded in his tall, slanted handwriting. I became a commercial laundry route driver because it was the only industry that would hire a pregnant teenager with a clean driving record and absolutely no connections. The pay was barely enough to keep the lights on. The hours were brutal, breaking my back and stealing my sleep. But the road was mine. The steering wheel was in my hands. And every time I shifted into gear, I could feel my father's hands covering mine. Maya is 6 years old now. She has my father's dark, observant eyes and my stubborn, unyielding jawline. She is the center of my universe. Every decision I make, every mile I drive, every drop of sweat I shed is for her. She is the reason I wake up before the sun. She is the reason I endure the condescension of the fleet managers and the hostility of the loading dock clerks. My husband, Andre, was also a driver. We met at a dusty truck stop off Interstate 85 over a plate of cold fries and a cup of burnt coffee. He had a laugh that could fill the entire diner, a deep booming sound that made the waitresses smile. He proposed to me with a cheap metal ring he bought from a vending machine in the parking lot. He slid it onto my finger, his eyes shining with a fierce, terrifying hope. "I cannot give you a diamond, Cleo," he whispered, his thumb tracing the knuckles of my hand. "But I can give you the road. I can give you a life where we are always moving forward, together." We were married for 4 years. 4 years of shared cab rides, of mapping out routes on paper atlases, of building a quiet, beautiful life in the spaces between the highway exits. Then came January, the ice storm. Andre was hauling a load of medical supplies down a steep embankment in the foothills. The temperature dropped suddenly. The black ice formed silently. His truck lost traction. It slid backward, the tires screaming against the frozen asphalt, and went over the edge. They found him 3 hours later. He was still holding the steering wheel. He left me with nothing but Maya, a mountain of grief that threatened to pull me under, and that stack of delivery manifests. I keep them in a battered shoebox under my bed. Sometimes, when the silence in the apartment becomes too loud, when the weight of being a single mother in a world that wants to crush you becomes too heavy to bear, I take them out. I spread them across the cheap laminate of my kitchen table. I trace my father's handwriting. I trace the ink. Each signature is a person. Each person is a life. Each life is a thread in the massive, invisible fabric of this city. We are not just moving dirty sheets and hospital gowns. We are keeping the hospitals clean. We are keeping the hotels ready. We are keeping the world turning while the billionaires sleep in their high-rise towers. And Marcus Vance, a man who has never felt the vibration of a steering wheel in his soft, uncalloused hands, wanted to take that fabric away. He wanted to replace us with silent, electric ghosts. He wanted to erase my father. He wanted to erase Andre. He wanted to erase me. He thought I was just a number on a spreadsheet. He thought I was an inefficiency to be corrected. He did not know that a mother's grief is a heavy, immovable object. And he did not know that the road remembers everything. The shoebox under my bed is not just a container. It is an archive of survival. It is the physical proof that I existed, that I loved, and that I was loved. Inside, resting on top of the manifests, is Andre's wedding ring. The metal is tarnished, turning a dull, oxidized green at the edges. I do not wear it on my finger. The thick gloves I wear at the loading docks would tear it away. Instead, I wear it on a simple leather cord around my neck. It rests against my collarbone, warmed by my skin, a constant quiet pressure against my heart. When the world feels like it is spinning out of control, I reach up and touch it through my shirt. It grounds me. It reminds me of the vending machine in the parking lot. It reminds me of the promise. Underneath the ring is Maya's first pair of shoes, tiny white sneakers with Velcro straps, the toes scuffed and dirty. She outgrew them in less than 3 months. I kept them because they still smell like her. They smell like baby powder, graham crackers, and the distinct, sweet scent of childhood. They are a reminder of the innocence I am fighting to protect. And at the very bottom of the box, folded into a tight, precise square, is the police report from Andre's crash. The paper is yellowed at the edges. The words are clinical, cold, and utterly devoid of the man who died. Driver lost control on an icy embankment. I keep it not to torture myself, but to remember the fragility of the physical world. I keep it to remember that the road can take everything from you in a single second. But I also keep it to remember that the road gave me everything I have. I am not alone in this fight. The world tries to convince single mothers that they are isolated, that their struggle is a private shame to be hidden behind closed doors. But the world is wrong. I have my found family. I have Mr. Hassan. Mr. Hassan owns the corner store on the intersection of Delancey and 43rd. He has owned that small, cluttered space for over 30 years. The bell above the door jingles with a specific off-key pitch every time someone enters. The air inside always smells warmly of cumin, fried dough, and old paper. His wife makes the sambosas in the back room. His son stocks the shelves with quiet efficiency. And Mr. Hassan keeps a brown paper bag behind the register right next to the lottery tickets, with my name written on it in thick black marker. Every single day, when I finish my grueling route and drive my truck past his store at 6:30 in the evening, he is standing on the sidewalk. He does not wave frantically. He just gives a small, dignified nod. I pull the heavy truck over, the air brakes hissing in protest. I climb down from the cab, my joints aching, my uniform stained with diesel and lint. He hands me the bag through the window. Inside is always the exact same thing: 2 hot sambosas, a cold bottle of mango juice, and a small, neat container of rice and curry for Maya. "You work too hard, Cleo," he says softly. His English is heavily accented, broken in places, but his kindness is entirely fluent. He looks at me with eyes that have seen decades of struggle. Eyes that recognize the specific, hollow exhaustion of a parent trying to hold the sky up. "I am fine, Mr. Hassan," I tell him. I say this every day. I am never fine. My back screams in pain. My bank account hovers near zero. My heart is a fragile, patched-up thing. But I say it anyway, because it is the armor we wear for each other. He does not push. He does not offer pity. Pity is a luxury working people cannot afford. Instead, he just smiles, a small, gentle curving of his lips. "Tell Maya her Uncle Hassan says hello, and tell her to finish her homework before she eats." Maya adores him. She calls him Uncle Hassan, even though we share no blood. When I was working double shifts to keep the electricity on, Mr. Hassan would let Maya sit on a small wooden stool behind the counter. He gave her a box of crayons and let her color on the backs of his old receipts. She called it her office. He kept her safe. He kept her fed. He kept her childhood intact while I was out on the highway, battling the ice and the clock. Mr. Hassan is not my family, but he is the bedrock of my community. He represents the quiet, unspoken pact between those who survive and those who endure. He does not ask for anything in return. He just leaves a paper bag behind the counter with my name on it. That is enough. That is more than enough. It is the warmth that keeps me from freezing when the corporate world turns its back on me. Because the corporate world is cold. It is entirely, ruthlessly digital. Marcus Vance and his army of lawyers look at the world through screens. They see data points. They see liability metrics. They see an algorithm that dictates a truck should brake exactly 0.4 seconds faster than a human can react. They thought they could wash away my history with a digital cycle. They thought they could scrub the servers, delete the logs, and rewrite the narrative of my life in binary code. But they forgot the physical world. They forgot that every time a 10-ton truck crosses a scale, a physical ticket is printed. They forgot that every time a driver signs a manifest, the ink bites into the fiber of the paper. They forgot that the truth is not stored in the cloud. The truth is heavy. The truth is physical. The truth leaves a stain that no digital bleach can remove. You can bleach the linen, but you cannot bleach the ledger. I close the shoebox. I run my hand over the worn cardboard lid. I stand up, my knees popping in the quiet apartment. I walk over to the kitchen table where my grease-stained logbook and my stack of way station tickets are waiting. They tried to erase me. They tried to take the road away. But paper remembers, and I am about to make sure they read every single word. The squeeze did not begin with a sudden, violent shove. It began with the quiet, methodical turning of a screw. It started in the sterile, fluorescent-lit office of Derek Holt, the fleet manager, a man whose tailored suits always smelled faintly of expensive cologne and absolute authority. Derek had never held a steering wheel in his life. He viewed the 10-ton laundry trucks not as heavy, breathing machines, but as mere data points on a glowing digital map. He slid a new route sheet across his polished mahogany desk. The paper made a dry, whispering sound against the wood. "We are optimizing your loop, Cleo," Derek said, his voice smooth, devoid of any human warmth. "Vance Automation has implemented a new routing algorithm. It is designed for maximum efficiency." I looked at the map. My stomach dropped, a slow, sickening plunge. The new route was not an optimization. It was a labyrinth. It forced me to crisscross the downtown grid during the brutal rush hour. It routed me through narrow, pothole-riddled industrial parks, where a truck of that size could barely turn around. It added 2 grueling hours to my day. It was a route designed by a computer that did not understand the physical reality of asphalt, traffic lights, and human exhaustion. It was a route designed to make me fail. "I know these streets, Derek," I said quietly, keeping my voice perfectly level. "This route adds 22 miles and 2 hours. The loading docks at the downtown hospitals have strict 15-minute windows. This schedule makes it physically impossible to hit the windows without violating the speed limit." Derek did not blink. His eyes were flat like 2 smooth river stones. "The algorithm accounts for the variables, Cleo. Just follow the GPS, sign the sheet." I signed it, because I had to, because Maya needed braces, and the landlord had just raised the rent by $50. The schedule shifts bled into my personal life like a slow poison. Derek began changing my dispatch times at the last possible minute. He would call me at 4:30 in the morning, his voice artificially cheerful, telling me I was needed on the afternoon shift. I would have to call Mr. Hassan, begging him to close the store early to pick up Maya. I would drive the afternoon shift, my eyes burning from fatigue, my shoulders aching with a deep, throbbing pain. I would finish at 8 at night, pick up my sleeping daughter from the corner store, carry her to the truck, and drive home in silence. Then came the micro-infraction hunt. It was a terrifying, suffocating game of whack-a-mole. Derek began watching me with a predatory stillness. He would stand by the yard gate with a digital clipboard, his eyes tracking my every movement. On a rainy Tuesday, he called me into his office. "Cleo, your uniform shirt was untucked during your pre-trip inspection. That is a safety violation. Write it up." On Thursday, it was the parking. "You parked the truck 2 inches over the yellow line in Bay 7. That is a facility hazard. Write it up." Every day, a new microscopic failure. Every day, a new note added to my digital file. The air in the terminal grew thick and heavy, charged with the unspoken threat of termination. I could feel the noose tightening, inch by inch. They were building a paper trail. They were manufacturing a narrative of incompetence, creating a legal justification to strip me of my commercial driver's license. They wanted to replace me with one of their silent, electric autonomous vehicles, and they needed me to be the liability that justified the switch. But they fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the road. They thought I was just a driver. They did not know that I was a daughter of the asphalt. They did not know that my father had taught me to read the subtle language of a diesel engine, and my husband had taught me to map the invisible currents of highway traffic. I did not complain. I did not cry in the break room. I simply adapted. I tucked my shirt in perfectly. I parked exactly on the line, and quietly, relentlessly, I began to build my own paper trail. I kept every single receipt. I logged every single mile in my physical, grease-stained logbook. I saved every dispatch ticket. I was gathering the bricks, one by one, waiting for the moment I would need to build a wall. The bottom did not just drop out, it shattered beneath my feet. It happened on a Thursday morning. The sky was the color of bruised iron, spitting a cold, miserable drizzle. I had just finished my pre-trip inspection, my hands smelling of diesel and cold metal, when Derek's assistant appeared at the cab door. She did not look at me. She just pointed toward the main terminal building. I walked into Derek's office. The air conditioning was blasting, making the room feel like a morgue. Derek was sitting behind his desk, flanked by a corporate lawyer I had never seen before. The lawyer was typing rapidly on a sleek laptop. Derek slid a thick manila folder across the desk. It stopped exactly at the edge, inches from my hands. March 15th, Derek said, his voice stripped of all pretense. At exactly 2 in the afternoon, your truck suffered a catastrophic rollover on the Interstate 85 embankment. The cargo was destroyed. The vehicle is a total loss. The air left my lungs. A high ringing sound filled my ears. March 15th, 2 in the afternoon. On March 15th, at 2 in the afternoon, I was not on Interstate 85. I was sitting at a Department of Transportation weigh station in the next county, waiting for the scale master to stamp my paperwork. That did not happen, I said. My voice was barely a whisper, but it was steady. I was at the scale house. I have the ticket. Derek smiled. It was a terrible, thin expression. The GPS data shows your truck left the road at 2:04 p.m. The dashcam was conveniently disabled. The telemetry confirms the rollover. You were fatigued, Cleo. You fell asleep at the wheel. The GPS is wrong, I said, the panic finally rising in my chest, hot and acidic. The dashcam was not disabled, it was malfunctioning, and I reported it. I have the maintenance ticket. I was at the weigh station. The digital record says otherwise, the corporate lawyer interrupted, his voice smooth and cold as polished glass. He turned the laptop around. On the screen was a digital map, showing a red line veering off the highway. Vance Automation relies on verified telemetry. The data is absolute. Derek slid a second piece of paper across the desk. It was a termination notice, coupled with an internal revocation of my commercial driving privileges. You are terminated effective immediately, Derek said. Furthermore, your internal CDL is revoked. You are banned from all Vance Automation yards. You are a liability. My knees felt weak. The floor seemed to tilt. They were not just taking my job. They were taking my license. They were taking my father's ghost. They were taking Andre's memory. They were erasing me from the only world I knew how to survive in. Then the lawyer slid a third piece of paper forward. The quiet money trap. However, the lawyer said smoothly, Mr. Vance believes in second chances. This is a severance agreement. It includes a payout of $15,000. In exchange, you sign the admission of fault on page 3, acknowledging that driver error caused the accident, and you sign the non-disclosure agreement. You take the money, you walk away quietly, and we do not pursue civil damages for the destroyed truck. $15,000. The number hung in the air, heavy and intoxicating. $15,000 was 3 months of rent. It was groceries, it was Maya's school supplies. It was the breathing room I had been desperately gasping for over the last 6 months. All I had to do was sign my name. All I had to do was admit to a lie. All I had to do was let them erase the truth. I looked at the pen. I looked at the admission of fault. If I signed it, I would be legally admitting that I was a dangerous driver. I would be validating their lie. I would be spitting on every mile my father ever drove and every ICC road Andre ever navigated. I would be selling my inheritance for $15,000. My hand trembled. The physical toll of the last 6 months, the exhaustion, the fear, the constant grinding pressure, threatened to pull me under. It would be so easy to just sign it, to take the money and disappear. I closed my eyes. I felt the cheap metal of Andre's wedding ring resting against my collarbone. I felt the phantom weight of my father's hands over mine on the steering wheel. I opened my eyes. I did not pick up the pen. I pushed it back across the mahogany desk. It rolled to a stop against Derek's knuckles. I did not flip the truck, Derek, I said, my voice dropping an octave, resonating with a cold, fierce clarity. And I am not signing a lie to cover up your algorithm's failure. Derek's thin smile vanished. His eyes hardened into chips of flint. "Then you will have nothing, Cleo. No job, no license, no severance. Security will escort you off the premises. Do not come back." I stood up. I did not say another word. I turned and walked out of the office. Walking through the terminal yard felt like walking through a graveyard. The massive laundry trucks sat in their bays, silent and cold. The security guard, a man named Luis, who I had shared coffee with for 3 years, would not meet my eyes as he opened the pedestrian gate. I stepped out onto the concrete sidewalk. The heavy metal gates slammed shut behind me. The electronic lock engaged with a loud final clack. I stood alone in the drizzle. I had no job. I had no license. I had $15 in my checking account. I was at the absolute, suffocating bottom. The digital ghost had won. The billionaire had erased me. Or so he thought. I sat at my small, laminate kitchen table. The apartment was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft, rhythmic breathing of Maya, who was asleep in the next room. The shoebox sat in front of me. I was not crying. The tears had burned themselves out on the walk home. What was left in their place was something much harder, something much colder. It was the quiet, burning spark of a mother who has been backed into a corner and realizes she has nothing left to lose. I opened the box. I took out my physical logbooks. I took out the stack of way station tickets. I took out the fuel receipts, the maintenance reports, the dispatch sheets. I began to lay them out on the table. I was not a hacker. I could not break into Vance Automation's servers. I could not alter their digital telemetry. But I knew something Marcus Vance did not know. I knew that the physical world leaves a stain that no digital bleach can remove. Every time my truck crossed a scale, a physical ticket was printed. Every time I signed a manifest, the ink bit into the fiber of the paper. I found the ticket for March 15th. The Department of Transportation way station receipt. The timestamp was printed in faint thermal ink, 1:45 p.m. The weight was recorded, 42,000 pounds. I was 50 miles away from Interstate 85. I heard a soft knock at the door, not the aggressive pound of a landlord, but a specific gentle rhythm. 2 quick taps, 1 slow. I walked over and opened the door. Standing in the hallway was Sarah Jenkins. Sarah was the regional representative for the Teamsters Union. She was a woman in her late 50s, with silver hair cut in a practical, no-nonsense bob, and hands that were calloused from 30 years of fighting on factory floors and loading docks. She wore a faded denim jacket and carried a thick canvas tote bag. She looked at me, her sharp, observant eyes taking in my pale face and the dark circles under my eyes. She did not offer pity. Pity was a luxury working people could not afford. "Luis called me," Sarah said, her voice a low, steady rumble. "Said Derek Holt just threw you to the wolves and tried to make you sign an NDA. He revoked my internal CDL," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "He fabricated a rollover. Sarah, they have the GPS data. They have the telemetry. How do I fight a digital ghost?" Sarah stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind her. She walked over to the kitchen table and looked at the sea of paper I had laid out. A slow, grim smile touched the corners of her mouth. "You don't fight a ghost with a ghost, Cleo," Sarah said gently. She reached into her canvas tote bag and pulled out a stack of blank, official Department of Transportation grievance forms and a thick binder of federal motor carrier safety regulations. She set them down next to my way station ticket. "I can file the initial union grievance," Sarah said, looking me directly in the eyes, her gaze fiercely respectful. "I can force them to the arbitration table. I can keep the corporate lawyers from burying you in paperwork, but I cannot drive this truck for you. You know the road. You know the physical reality of the route. I just know the rule book. You need to map the timeline. You need to prove that their digital map contradicts the physical world." She did not take the pen. She did not tell me what to write. She simply provided the framework, the armor, and the space. She respected my agency, knowing that if I was going to survive this, I had to be the one to pull the trigger. "Thank you, Sarah," I whispered, the tightness in my chest loosening just a fraction. "Take your time," Sarah said softly. She poured herself a cup of my cheap instant coffee, sat down in the chair opposite me, and opened her binder. "It'll be right here. We will go through every single mile, Cleo, every single minute. I picked up my pen. The physical weight of it felt grounding. I pulled the March 15th way station ticket toward me. I looked at the timestamp, 1:45 p.m. I looked at the fabricated accident report Derek had shown me, 2:04 p.m. They thought they could wash away the truth in a digital cycle. They thought they could scrub the servers and rewrite the narrative of my life in binary code. But they forgot the physical world. They forgot that ink bites into paper. They forgot that a mother's grief is a heavy, immovable object. I began to write. I mapped the timeline. I matched the way station tickets to the fuel receipts. I matched the dispatch sheets to the maintenance logs. I was not just organizing paper. I was building a fortress. The digital ghost had tried to erase me, but the paper remembered, and I was going to make sure they read every single word. The kitchen table disappeared beneath a sprawling sea of thermal paper, carbon copies, and grease-stained logbooks. It was no longer a place to eat meals. It had been transformed into a war room. Sarah Jenkins sat across from me, her reading glasses perched precariously on the end of her nose, a red pen hovering over a meticulously drawn spreadsheet. We had been at it for 9 continuous hours. The only sounds in the apartment were the scratch of her pen, the low hum of the refrigerator, and the soft, rhythmic breathing of Maya, who was asleep on the living room rug, wrapped tightly in a fleece blanket. 14 way station receipts, Sarah murmured, her voice a low, steady anchor in the quiet room. 22 fuel invoices, 31 dispatch logs, and 48 pages of your handwritten logbook. I rubbed my eyes, the heels of my hands pressing hard against my aching temples. My fingers were permanently stained with ink and diesel grime, the physical toll of a life spent moving heavy things across long distances. Is it enough, Sarah? They have a fleet of corporate lawyers. They have an algorithm that says I crashed. I just have receipts. Sarah looked up, her eyes sharp, unyielding, and fiercely respectful. You do not just have receipts, Cleo. You have a physical timeline that their digital ghost cannot overwrite. An algorithm can be programmed to lie. But a thermal ticket from a Department of Transportation scale house? That is a machine stamping a physical reality. We just need to find the exact moment their lie breaks. The work was agonizingly slow. It was not like the movies, where a hacker types furiously and a progress bar fills up in seconds. This was the grueling, unglamorous reality of working-class justice. It was matching a fuel receipt from a gas station in County A to a dispatch log that claimed I was in County B. It was cross-referencing the mileage on my logbook with the toll booth timestamps. My back ached with a deep, throbbing pain. My eyes burned from the strain. The sheer volume of the lie they had constructed was suffocating. They had built a mountain of false telemetry, and I was trying to dismantle it with a teaspoon. Around 8 o'clock, the gentle, familiar jingle of the front doorbell echoed through the apartment. I tensed, my shoulders locking up, expecting another process server, another cold threat. But Sarah just smiled and nodded toward the door. Mr. Hassan walked in, carrying a large, insulated thermal bag. He did not say a word at first. He simply walked to the kitchen table, gently moved a stack of fuel receipts to make space, and began unpacking containers. The rich, warm aroma of cardamom, roasted lamb, and fresh bread instantly pushed back the sterile smell of old paper and anxiety. "You work too hard," Mr. Hassan said softly, his voice a deep, comforting rumble. He placed a steaming cup of sweet tea in front of me, then another in front of Sarah. The mind needs fuel before it can fight the giants. He pulled up a chair, not to the table, but to the small armchair in the corner of the kitchen. He opened his evening newspaper, the rustle of the pages providing a strange, grounding white noise. He did not ask about the lawsuit. He did not ask about the billionaire. He just sat there, a silent, immovable sentinel, keeping the world at bay while we rebuilt my life one receipt at a time. I took a bite of the lamb. It was tender, spiced perfectly, and tasted like home. It tasted like survival. I looked at Maya, sleeping peacefully on the rug, and then at Mr. Hassan, reading his paper under the dim yellow light. The crushing weight in my chest loosened, just a fraction. They could take my truck. They could take my license. But they could not touch this. They could not evict me from this community. Okay, I whispered, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. I pulled the logbook for March closer to me. Let us find the break. The break did not come from our side. It came through the mail, delivered by a man in a cheap suit who handed me a thick registered envelope and walked away without making eye contact. I tore it open at the kitchen table. The letterhead was embossed in gold. Sterling, Vance & Croft, attorneys at law. The top law firm in the city, the kind of firm that billed by the 6-minute increment and ate working people for breakfast. It was a cease and desist order, coupled with a notice of intent to sue for defamation, tortious interference, and breach of the non-disclosure agreement I had refused to sign. They were claiming that by filing my union grievance and my Department of Transportation complaint, I was actively damaging the reputation of Vance Automation and interfering with their upcoming multi-million-dollar municipal contract for autonomous transit. My hands trembled as I read the dense, legal jargon. The sheer financial threat was paralyzing. They were threatening to seek damages in excess of $2 million. They wanted to bankrupt me. They wanted to take the apartment. They wanted to make an example of me so that no other driver would ever question their telemetry again. The fear was a cold, physical thing, wrapping around my lungs, making it hard to breathe. It was the specific, suffocating terror of poverty, the feeling of the ground dissolving beneath your feet. My phone buzzed. It was Derek Holt. I stared at the screen. The name looked like a venomous thing. I let it ring 3 times before I answered, putting it on speaker so Sarah could hear. Cleo. Derek's voice was smooth, dripping with a false corporate sympathy. I heard the process server just left your place. I am calling to give you one last chance to be reasonable. You are playing a very dangerous game. Marcus Vance does not lose to route drivers. We will bury you in discovery. We will take your apartment. We will take your daughter's college fund. Sign the settlement. Take the $15,000. Walk away. I looked at Sarah. She was not looking at me. She was looking at the legal document, her red pen tapping a slow, rhythmic beat against the table. She gave me a single, imperceptible nod. Derek, I said, my voice terrifyingly calm, stripped of all the exhaustion that had plagued me for months. You fabricated a rollover. You stole my license. You tried to buy my silence with hush money. I have the GPS data, Cleo, Derek snapped, his polite mask slipping for a fraction of a second, revealing the arrogant machinery beneath. I have the dashcam logs. I have the telemetry. You fell asleep. You crashed. The digital record is absolute. You are just a disgruntled employee trying to extort a Fortune 500 company. Sign the paper or we will crush you. He hung up. The dial tone buzzed in the quiet room, a harsh electronic sting. Mr. Hassan folded his newspaper. He stood up, walked over, and placed a heavy, warm hand on my shoulder. Giants make a lot of noise when they are afraid, Cleo, he said gently. Do not let the noise deafen you to the truth. He patted my shoulder, picked up his empty teacup, and walked out the door, leaving me in the quiet aftermath of the threat. I looked at the cease and desist letter. $2 million. The words blurred together. They had all the money. They had all the power. They had the digital ghost on their side. But Sarah reached across the table. She pulled the thick legal document toward her. She did not look scared. She looked hungry. Cleo, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a fierce, urgent whisper. Read paragraph 4, page 3. Read it out loud. I pulled the document closer. The paper was heavy, expensive, crisp. I found page 3. I found paragraph 4. The section where their lawyers were laying out the undisputed facts of the case to establish the basis for my alleged defamation. I read it aloud, my voice shaking slightly at first, then growing steadier with every word. On March 15th, at exactly 2:04 in the afternoon, the claimant, Cleo Ward, operating vehicle number 402, suffered a catastrophic loss of control at mile marker 42 on Interstate 85, resulting in a total loss of the vehicle and cargo, due to driver fatigue and negligence. I stopped. The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Read it again, Sarah commanded, her eyes blazing with a fierce, undeniable light. Read the time. Read the location. March 15th, I said, the realization dawning on me, cold and sharp as a blade. At exactly 2 and 4 minutes in the afternoon. Mile marker 42 on Interstate 85. Sarah slammed her hand on the table, not in anger but in triumph. They put it in writing, Cleo. They put the lie in writing, on the letterhead of the most expensive law firm in the state, under the threat of federal perjury, to make their defamation claim stick. She grabbed my physical logbook. She flipped to the middle. She pulled out the thermal ticket from the Department of Transportation weigh station. Look at your ticket, Cleo. What is the timestamp? I looked down at the faded thermal ink. 1:45 in the afternoon. County Line weigh station. Mile marker 92 on Route 11. And what is the distance between Route 11 and Interstate 85? Sarah asked, her voice ringing with a fierce, undeniable justice. 50 miles, I whispered. The fear evaporated, replaced by a surging, electric heat that burned away the last of my exhaustion. It takes a 10-ton truck at least 45 minutes to drive 50 miles. If I was at the weigh station at 1:45, I could not possibly be at mile marker 42 on Interstate 85 at 2 and 4 minutes. They tried to use the legal bludgeon to crush you, Sarah said, a grim, beautiful smile spreading across her face. They tried to scare you with a $2 million lawsuit. But in their arrogance, in their absolute certainty that you were just a stupid, tired driver who would roll over and die, they signed a legal affidavit detailing the exact coordinates and timestamp of a physical impossibility. I looked at the cease and desist letter. It was no longer a threat. It was a confession. It was a signed, notarized, legally binding admission of the exact lie they had told. They had taken their digital ghost and anchored it to the physical world with ink. They had given me the weapon I needed to kill it. The trap had not just backfired. It had snapped shut on their own hands. I picked up my pen. The physical weight of it felt like a gavel. I pulled a fresh sheet of paper toward me. I was not just a driver anymore. I was the auditor of their reality. Sarah, I said, my voice steady, resonant, and entirely my own. Draft the response. Tell them we accept their timeline, and then we are going to introduce them to the Department of Transportation scale master. The digital ghost was dead. The ink held the truth, and now it was going to speak. The administrative hearing room at the Department of Transportation smelled faintly of floor wax and still coffee. It was a room designed to make people feel small, with its drop ceilings, humming fluorescent lights, and walls painted in a soul-crushing shade of institutional beige. I sat on one side of a long, scarred laminate table. On the other side sat Sterling, the lead attorney for Vance Automation, flanked by 2 junior associates and Derek Holt, who was staring rigidly at the grain of the table, refusing to meet my eyes. Between us sat the hearing officer, a weary-looking woman named Administrator Hayes, who was methodically organizing her files. She did not look like a savior. She looked like a civil servant who had heard 1,000 excuses and was entirely immune to corporate theater. Sterling cleared his throat, a sharp, practiced sound that echoed off the cinder-block walls. He slid a sleek, digital tablet toward the center of the table. Administrator Hayes, Sterling began, his voice dripping with a smooth, condescending authority. This matter is straightforward. The telemetry data from Vance Automation clearly demonstrates that vehicle number 402 left the roadway at 2:04 p.m. on March 15th. The driver, Miss Ward, suffered a catastrophic loss of control due to fatigue. We have the digital logs. We have the algorithmic reconstruction. We are simply here to finalize the administrative revocation of her commercial license and to address her frivolous union grievance. He spoke with the absolute, unshakable confidence of a man who believed that money could rewrite gravity. He believed that because his client was a billionaire, the digital record was an unassailable fortress. Administrator Hayes adjusted her reading glasses. Miss Ward, you have filed a counterclaim stating the telemetry is fabricated. Do you have physical evidence to support this, or are we just trading allegations today? I did not reach for a tablet. I did not ask for a screen to be projected. Instead, I reached into my worn canvas tote bag. My hands, though trembling slightly from the adrenaline coursing through my veins, moved with a deep, practiced certainty. I pulled out a thick, meticulously organized stack of physical paper. I placed it on the table. The sound of the heavy paper hitting the laminate was a dull, definitive thud. It was a stark, physical contrast to the silent, glowing screens of the corporate team. "I have physical evidence, Administrator," I said, my voice remarkably steady, resonating with a quiet, unyielding, fierce clarity. "I have the original physical Department of Transportation weigh station receipts for my route on March 15th. And I have the cease and desist letter sent by Mr. Sterling's own firm, which legally establishes their timeline." Sterling let out a short, dismissive breath. "Objection. The cease and desist is a legal notice regarding her defamation, not a log of her driving. It becomes a log of her driving when you use it to establish the exact coordinates of an accident that never happened," I replied, not raising my voice, but letting the words hang heavily in the sterile air. I slid a single crisp sheet of paper toward Administrator Hayes. It was page 3 of the cease and desist letter. "Paragraph 4, I said, my finger resting firmly on the text. "Your firm states, under penalty of perjury, that I suffered a loss of control at exactly 2:04 p.m. at mile marker 42 on Interstate 85. You signed this. You put your firm's letterhead on this physical impossibility." Then I slid the second piece of paper forward. It was the thermal receipt from the County Line Way station. The ink was faded, but the numbers were undeniably sharp. "Here is the physical reality," I continued, my voice dropping to a near whisper that forced everyone in the room to lean in. "At 1:45 p.m., I was at the way station at mile marker 92 on Route 11. The scale master stamped this ticket. The weight was recorded at 42,000 pounds. I was 50 miles away from Interstate 85. The silence in the room suddenly became suffocating, thick and heavy, pressing against my eardrums. "It takes a 10-ton truck at least 45 minutes to drive 50 miles, I said, looking directly at Sterling. His face had drained of all color, his composure shatteringly undone. If I was at the way station at 1:45, I could not possibly be at mile marker 42 on Interstate 85 at 2:04. The physical paper proves your digital ghost is a lie. You fabricated the accident to cover up a routing algorithm that forced me to violate federal hours of service." Administrator Hayes picked up the way station ticket. She held it up to the light, examining the physical stamp, the thermal ink, the undeniable reality of it. She then looked at the cease and desist letter. She looked at Sterling. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice dangerously calm, "did your client instruct you to state these coordinates in this legal filing?" Sterling opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked at Derek, who was now sweating profusely, his eyes darting frantically toward the exit. We relied on the telemetry data provided by the fleet manager," Sterling stammered, his smooth veneer cracking irreparably. "The telemetry," Administrator Hayes repeated, her tone turning to ice, "which has now been proven by physical state-issued documentation to be a fabricated timeline. You didn't just lie, counselor. You put a lie into a sworn legal affidavit to intimidate a commercial driver. She did not yell. She did not need to. The sheer, overwhelming weight of the physical evidence had already crushed the digital illusion." She pulled a thick official folder toward her. She uncapped her fountain pen. The scratch of the nib against the paper was the loudest sound in the world. She signed the document with a heavy, deliberate finality. She pulled a heavy brass stamp from her desk and pressed it firmly onto the page. The sound of the stamp hitting the ink pad was a sharp, ringing bell of absolute justice. She slid the document across the table toward me. "Expungement. Order," she said quietly, her eyes meeting mine with a profound, deeply respectful acknowledgement. "All records of the at-fault accident reported on March 15th are hereby sealed, corrected, and permanently destroyed. Furthermore, your commercial driving privileges are fully reinstated, effective immediately. And Mr. Sterling, I am forwarding your sworn affidavit to the State Ethics Board." I reached out and took the paper. It was warm from the printer. It was heavy with the weight of the truth. The digital ghost was dead. The ink held the record. and I was finally irrevocably free. Walking out of the Department of Transportation building, the afternoon sun felt entirely different. It was not just light, it was a physical warmth that seeped into my aching shoulders, melting the frost that had settled there 6 months ago. The city around me was loud, chaotic, and beautifully alive. Tires hummed against the asphalt, horns blared in the distance. The air smelled of exhaust and roasting nuts from a street vendor. It was the smell of the physical world, the world I belonged to. I kept my hand in my coat pocket, my fingers tracing the crisp, folded edges of the expungement order. It was just a piece of paper, but it was the most beautiful thing I had ever held. I did not go straight home. I walked the 6 blocks to the corner of Delancey and 43rd. The bell above the door of Mr. Hassan's store jingled with its familiar, off-key pitch. The air inside was a thick, comforting embrace of cumin, fried dough, and old paper. Mr. Hassan was behind the counter, wiping down the laminate with a damp cloth. When he looked up and saw me, he stopped. He did not ask how the hearing went. He did not need to. He looked at my face, and he saw the peace that had returned to my eyes. He set the cloth down. He walked to the back room and returned not with the usual small paper bag, but with a large, steaming platter covered in foil. He placed it on the small table in the corner of the store, the one usually reserved for the delivery drivers. "Today we eat," he said softly, his eyes crinkling at the corners with a deep, tender warmth, not just sambosas. "Today we have lamb, we have rice, we celebrate the road." Maya ran out from the back room, her hands covered in crayon dust. She threw her arms around my waist, burying her face in my coat. I knelt down, wrapping my arms around her small, solid frame, breathing in the scent of her hair. She was safe. We were safe. "Did you win, Mama?" she asked, looking up at me with those dark, observant eyes. "I did, baby," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "We won." The door jingled again. Sarah Jenkins walked in. She did not come over to the table, she did not interrupt our moment. She simply walked to the counter, bought a black coffee, and gave me a slow, deeply respectful nod. "You drove that truck yourself, Cleo," Sarah said, her voice a low, steady rumble of pride. "I just handed you the map, you navigated the storm." "Thank you, Sarah," I said, my voice thick with an overwhelming, quiet gratitude. "For everything." Sarah smiled, a small, genuine curving of her lips. "Take care of your girl. I will see you at the Union Hall on Tuesday." She turned and walked out, leaving us in the warm, golden light of the store. She understood. She knew her place, and she honored mine. There was no need for grand declarations. The respect was enough. Later that evening, after Maya was asleep, her breathing soft and rhythmic in the quiet apartment, I sat at the kitchen table. I pulled the battered shoebox from under the bed. I opened the lid. I looked at the stack of my father's delivery manifests. I looked at Andre's tarnished wedding ring. I looked at Maya's tiny scuffed sneakers. And finally, I looked at the police report from Andre's crash. For 6 months, these items had felt like weapons. They had felt like heavy, suffocating anchors tying me to a past of grief and loss. I had used them to fuel my anger. I had used them to build my fortress. But tonight, as I ran my fingers over my father's tall, slanted handwriting, the weight was gone. They were no longer weapons. They were just memories. They were just love. I took Andre's ring out of the box. I unclasped the leather cord and slipped the cheap, tarnished metal onto my right hand. It fit perfectly. It felt incredibly light. I had fought the digital ghost. I had proven that the physical world, the world of ink and paper and sweat, could not be erased by an algorithm. I had protected my inheritance. You can bleach the linen, but you cannot bleach the ledger. The stain of their lie had been washed away, not by magic, not by money, but by the quiet, relentless accumulation of the truth. I closed the shoebox. I did not put it back under the bed. I placed it on the highest shelf in the living room, where the morning sun would hit it. It was time to stop hiding my history. It was time to let it breathe. I turned off the kitchen light. I walked down the short hallway to Maya's room. I stood in the doorway, watching her sleep, listening to the steady, peaceful rhythm of her breathing. I was home. The road was mine again, and the paper remembered so that I could finally rest. We live in a world that is increasingly obsessed with the digital. We are told that data is absolute, that algorithms are objective, and that the cloud is an infallible judge of our worth. Corporations and billionaires use this digital illusion to control us, to rewrite our histories, and to erase our labor with the stroke of a keyboard. They want us to believe that if it is not on a screen, it does not exist. But the physical world is stubborn. The physical world leaves a mark, the ink on a receipt, the stamp on a way station ticket, the signature on a manifest. These are not just pieces of paper. They are the physical proof of our existence, our labor, and our dignity. When the system tries to gaslight you, when the algorithm tries to erase you, do not look at the screen. Look at your hands. Look at your records. Keep your paper. Keep your receipts. Because when the digital ghosts try to rewrite your reality, the physical truth will always be the anchor that holds you down. Working-class dignity is not given, it is documented. And no billionaire can buy a physical reality that refuses to be erased. I want to hear from you. In a world where everything is stored on a phone or a computer, what is a physical object you keep that holds a memory no screen could ever capture? Is it a letter, a photograph, a ticket stub, or a piece of jewelry? Tell me about it in the comments below. Let us celebrate the physical things that keep our history alive. If you believe that a working mother's truth should be written in ink, not deleted by an algorithm, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep telling stories that honor the quiet, relentless strength of those who keep the world turning. Stay grounded, keep your records, and I will see you in the next story.